Welcome back to Inside City Hall. My next guests represent New Yorkers in all 5 boroughs with constituents who live in areas that were forced to evacuate. Joining us to discuss Hurricane Irene, the damage it caused, and the government's response are Queens City Councilman James Sanders, who represents the Rockaways, State Senator Daniel Squadron, who represents downtown Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan, Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., and Congressman Michael Grimm, whose district includes part of Brooklyn and all of Staten Island. Good to see all of you. Glad you all made it through. Let me start with you, Congressman. We heard a lot of I saw a lot of pictures, and we heard a lot of the rescues and other stuff that had to happen in Staten Island. Was this a surprise to you?
Well, it wasn't a surprise because I think the administration did a very good job of getting the word out, and they were, excellent as far as keeping in touch with us, keeping us informed, giving us numbers of who to speak to. So I think we were thoroughly prepared. And so I wouldn't say it was a surprise. When I first heard that a hurricane was coming to New York City, that was surprising, but we were prepared for it.
And Councilman, you live in or near one of the evacuation zones if you're out in the Rockaways,
Yes,
right?
I live in Zone A. The lower 9th Ward of New York City is my district.
Okay, there you go. So you had to evacuate.
Yes, my district had to evacuate. I chose to shelter in place. I really feel strongly that government shouldn't flee, that after all of these crises happen, there should be someone in government there. I took my lesson from Katrina.
Okay, so you stayed in your home or in the evacuation center?
I was at a safe place. I'm not trying to encourage anyone to go and do what I did, but I certainly was in a safe shelter where as soon as this was up, we were able to get out and to see what really was going on.
Okay. And
keep in mind, he's a Marine, so he does have the training.
Well, both of you guys are Marines, right? So I know you wanted to be in the thick of all of this stuff. Ruben Diaz, we were trying to get information specifically, actually, about what was going on around City Island and Orchard Beach. What was the response like up your way?
Again, I have to just echo what the Congressman said. The preparation was incredible. And, I've been on your show. I've been here a number of times criticizing the mayor, the administration on myriad different issues. And if I have to give a grade, it's an A grade in terms of preparation. The amount of telephone calls, conference calls, Facebook worked extremely well. And I'm proud as the Bronx Borough President of Bronxites, who not only worked together and helped their neighbors, but really got the message out there, and we were well prepared. And so because of that, we had very minimal damage. We're assessing some of the damage now. I toured the Bronx yesterday and today. I went to Edgewater. I went out to Classen Point and Hunts Point, City Island, Silver Beach, some of the A zones, and all you see is a couple of branches down, not too much in terms of water damage. Orchard Beach suffered a lot of deterioration in terms of the sand, but that's something that we'll have to look into next year during the beach season. But I really have to tip my hat off to Mayor Bloomberg. He showed leadership. I think it was a good lesson learned from the blizzard.
Okay, that's a map there of all the Zone A's, and we're going to go to you now, Senator Squadron. I see a bunch on both sides of the river of your district in Zone A. How did it go for you?
I think I had more than 40,000 constituents in Zone A. And there's no question that in the 48 hours or the hours leading up to the event, the administration, every member of the city, all the volunteers did an extraordinary job and really got the word out. I do think that there are some longer term questions that were raised by the preparation, and nothing should take away from the great work that the mayor, every member of the mayor's administration, all the volunteers did in those hours. But I do think that we've learned some lessons about pieces of preparation that need to be done, I think, to a greater extent.
Well, say more. I mean, if we could tweak the preparation a little bit for next time, hoping that it never comes, but what would it look like?
Well, look, I think there were some real concerns. I had over 18,000 public housing residents who lived in Zone A, and as of Friday, there wasn't a plan to have transportation for them yet in place. Now, we brought that up, and we worked together with the city to solve that problem in the hours Friday night and Saturday morning. But that should have been prepared for ahead of time. There were issues. We were sort of in an ad hoc way dealing with language barriers on Saturday, on the day of the evacuation. I think that the fact that especially for the poorest individuals, immigrants, people who have language barriers, some of the preparation wasn't fully tailored for them, and I think that needs to be dealt with over the long term so that we're prepared for the next one.
If I could chime in here, I would agree with the senator. I think that in my own district, many of us had been speaking for years that the evacuation plan that they had for our district was flawed. And finally, at the 11th hour, the plan was changed. At first, the plan was to send us to Belmont Racetrack, which was way too far away. The roads you couldn't do it. The roads flooded. And Belmont Racetrack is in a depression, a valley. Water fills a valley. So we couldn't get on first base for years. However, when the mayor, to his credit, moved on this, it showed that he was able to stop and innovate, tear all the plans up and begin anew. They came up with a far better plan, and had they done the first plan, havoc would have entailed.
Errol, let me just say this. In order for us, I mean, that's one thing to have an adequate evacuation plan, but at the same time, people have to understand that when we say evacuate, you should evacuate. And representing areas of the Bronx where we had over 150,000, 200,000 residents in areas where they should have evacuated. The fact of the matter is that when you look at the shelters, there were less than 500 people in the shelters that were designated, the 14 different shelters in the Bronx. And so I think people next time, and we dodged the bullet this time. Irene wasn't as strong, didn't hit as strong in areas of the Bronx and throughout some areas of the city. Obviously, some areas did get hit pretty hard. But next time, we need to take it a little more seriously. Even on Facebook, a lot of people were saying, I'm a Bronxite, I'm tough. And we understand that Bronxites are tough, but you have to be careful. And whenever the mayor, whoever that person is in the future, says that we have a mandatory evacuation, I think we should take heed to those.
Well, and ironically, this becomes one more story that people are going to remember. So, I remember back in, 2011, they told us all to leave, and in the end, we didn't have to. So it's going to be even harder than ever.
Yeah. One of the things I would look to do in the future is maybe break it up. Everything ran through Borough Hall. And I think that here in the city, I think that you have some great borough presidents, and it probably would have gone even a little more smoothly if we would have let each borough have, say, a deputy mayor in charge of a borough and work directly out of the borough president's office. Maybe even have that borough president set up a command post for all the elected officials in their borough, so that the relay is just simpler and easier instead of everyone inundating the same deputy mayors out of City Hall. So that's something that I think the mayor would probably look at next time.
I was asked about the comparison between this and the winter blizzard response, and one difference seemed to be that City Hall went out of its way to keep local officials involved and patched in. Is that so?
Absolutely.
And they led from the front. Unlike the blizzard, where the absence of leadership was astounding. Here, the mayor personally took charge. He led from the front. There was no question of who's in charge and what resources were able to be brought. Here, the mayor led. The blizzard led.
And I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Not only did he lead, but they listened. And there were times, just going back to sort of reshifting focus on things in the last minute, when we were on these conference calls, when my staff was on the conference calls with the deputy mayors, we would bring certain things to light, and they would listen and make sure that everything is okay once that conference call was done. And then there was a lot of follow-up with emails, through Facebook, telephone calls, be it conference calls or personal, there was a great exchange. And so we felt like, being from the Bronx, since we know the Bronx best, that we were able to tailor some of the emergency response based on what we knew, and they listened to us.
But that's both the short-term and the long-term story. Yeah. So in one of those conference calls, Assemblyman Brian Kavanaugh brought up the fact that there weren't buses planned for public housing developments. We then worked and got them there. So that's a great example of responsiveness, of being out there, of leading. We had the chairman of NYCHA down on the Lower East Side on Saturday looking at some of the problems, but the fact is there were also problems there. Again, I think that in terms of the short-term responsiveness and aggressiveness from an administration that had a lot going on, it was truly extraordinary. But I do think that leading up to the next storm, especially when you talk about the kinds of populations that you know get left behind and are most vulnerable in the case of a disaster. The plan needs to be better.
Well, let me ask you, actually, since you brought it up the next time and planning for another, say, 50-year storm or whatever it might be. I got contacted by somebody who pointed out that our roads, our infrastructure, our sewer systems, and so forth are all in desperate need of upgrades. But you all, and this was my response to her, as a matter of fact, you all are in the business of running every couple of years, every 2 years, every 4 years. You've got short-term considerations. It's very hard to sort of get a strong commitment and a big plan in place for something that's supposed to last 20 or 30 or 50 years, and in many cases is invisible, like a new sewer system. How do we deal with that dilemma?
Well, I think we deal with it the way we dealt with this crisis. This was truly a bipartisan effort. We had conference calls. It didn't matter whether you were an R or a D, a conservative, an independent. It was completely irrelevant. We had a job to do, and there was no politics involved. That's what we have to do here. We have to get past the politics and the rhetoric and the nonsense and identify issues and problems and deal with them and bring solutions. And if we can cross party lines and work together, there really are no limits to what we can do. I mean, back to the responsiveness, here I am, conservative Republican, I'm asking for a generator for Richmond University Medical Center, and I'm getting calls from all the Ds, all the Democrats from the state and the city saying, we're with you, we're putting calls in with you, they're working just as hard, we work side by side, and you know what? The deputy mayor found us a generator, and we got it done. And that's what we need to do for a long-term plan.
Let me agree with my fellow Marine that at the end of the day, we're going to have to remember that we're Americans. And if we can just put that in there. But let me also say that we should also give kudos to the local groups that also took place in this. There are civilian emergency response teams that also played a role in preparing their communities for this disaster. But they should also take it upon themselves to lobby all of us to do the long-range planning. The people themselves have to come out and insist long-range planning is taking place.
That's a great point. Both the CERT teams and also I had a public housing development in my district where close to 90% of people evacuated, which is 3 times a higher percentage than the lowest development in my district. That was a partnership between a tenant association that was organized and ready to go with the staff. The extent to which getting regular folks involved on the ground every day is an important part of government working is a great lesson.
Specifically to your question in terms of sewers and the infrastructure there, I think that we and the city government should look at dedicating some capital dollars. In the state, there's something called multimodal monies that are usually used for transportation. There has to be a way, I know that in the federal government we need this assistance, and we see it all the time. It's not just during the hurricane season. Whenever there's rainfall, we see what areas are usually flooded. In the Bronx, we know if you go to Ferry Point, if you go to Pelham Parkway, we know where the flood is happening. And so during this time, we heard that the city of New York identified with DEP and emptied out catch basins and cleaned them out. We also know that this only occurs during a certain period of time or every certain amount of years. I think we need to start pinpointing them and clean them out and perhaps bring new ones in, if not more, in the areas that need it and not wait for 5 or 10 years to do so.
And that's one of the things I think we had a lost opportunity with the stimulus package. We spent a lot of money, but the vast majority of the bulk of the money should have been towards infrastructure for the entire country.
Well, it's not too late. You can always do stimulus too.
Absolutely
and if you
not.
Want to announce it here tonight?
Absolutely not.
Okay, back to politics. Okay. Thank you all so much for sharing with us. Look forward to talking with you again real soon. Thanks for coming in. We are going to take a break now. When we come back, I will ask our Consultants Corner just how much an endorsement from Mike Bloomberg can help a candidate in the 2013 mayor's race. Stay with us.